students were actually running off the bus going, "We're gonna see coal!" And I thought, wow, you know, if you can get that excited about coal, the rest of this trip is gonna be super fun because it's gonna get even more exciting from here. They were excited to be on glaciers. They're engaged in the project. They're doing the things we're asking them to do. They show up in the classroom. These students are really diligent, and I'm very impressed with their commitment to learning something about geoscience and having some fun at the same time.
GeoFORCE is a geology college prep program that gets rural Alaskans involved in geology and science.
Students enter the program in 8th or 9th grade, and then they go on week to 10-day field trips every year for the next 4 years.
The first GeoFORCE Alaska trip is in Alaska studying how sediment is deposited. So we look at streams and glaciers to see how sediment moves throughout Alaska. The next 3 years we travel to the lower 48.
On this year's trip, we're going to the Pacific Northwest, specifically Oregon and Washington, to visit a different number of volcanoes, each with its own different form and history.
Science faculty at the University of Alaska Fairbanks have been concerned for some time about the fact that rural students are underrepresented in science majors. We've been asking ourselves why this is. Some of the problems that we can identify are low high school graduation rates among rural communities. Alaska's North Slope Borough reports a 60% high school graduation rate. Students also sometimes experience culture shock coming to a larger university, and sometimes they're underprepared, and we thought GeoFORCE would be a great solution to many of these problems.
After high school, I wanted to work in the oil fields and make some money and just keep going on with life through that.
I really had no thought of geology before the program. I didn't really think about it or care about it much, so I didn't think of it as anything.
I thought it was just purely the study of rocks, and at first I thought it was boring. But now GeoFORCE changed my aspect of that. This trip that we're on makes geology come alive because instead of just learning it from a textbook or a movie, we're there. We're there. And we're still getting lectures, so we're still getting all the education we need on what we're looking at.
GeoFORCE is all about getting out in the field and actually seeing some rocks, walking around them, getting your hands on them, maybe making a map, doing some things that actual geologists do.
You study it in the guidebook that they give you, then you go out to the field and you look and you could hear the lectures and you could actually pick something up, look at it and know what you just read a couple hours before.
I was in a biology class where a teacher only taught us out of a textbook, and I didn't retain a single thing that year. But with geology, I can remember it until the next year because we do hands-on learning, and I get to touch the rocks, I get to feel how they feel, and I get to remember how they feel, so the next time I see them, I know and I've remembered.
One of my favorite quotes from a student this summer was, I asked him, what was your favorite stop? And he said Mount St. Helens. He talked about reading in the plane when we were flying down here in his guidebook about Mount St. Helens, and he thought it was really cool. And he said when we got there, I had my guidebook open and I looked at the picture in the guidebook, and then I looked up at the mountain and I looked back, and he's like, and it all made sense. He was like, it was amazing to be standing in front of it and see where that entire side of the mountain had been blown away. You can't get that from a picture. You can only get that by standing at the base of Mount St. Helens.
Geology focuses, I think, on really two things: identification and pattern recognition. It stresses the three-dimensional aspects. And of course, rocks are three-dimensional, so yes, we're teaching students to identify rocks. We want them to be able to pick one up, look at a rock, sure, be able to give it a name, but the name tells you a lot about its history. And being able to use the rocks to reconstruct Earth history is one of the main things we're teaching through GeoFORCE.
I love being able to travel around the whole United States, and being on a bus makes it even cooler because you get to drive past it and not see an aerial view of it.
GeoFORCE has exposed me to a bunch of magical places like the Grand Canyon. I don't know if I ever would have gone if it wasn't for GeoFORCE, and it showed me how magnificent things could be.
We did an exercise yesterday where we introduced them to the geology of a new area. We talk about the different layers they can see, the different rock types, and then we asked them to put it all in order. It was complicated enough that the instructor and I had a little debate. We had a little powwow off to the side like, okay, let's make sure we've got this straight before we help students. So it's not easy, even for professionals, and they did a really good job.
We do the pre-test just about the same day that we hop off the plane to start GeoFORCE. And it has a lot of questions about things that we will learn, but nothing that we probably heard about yet.
Generally, results are not good, and we don't expect them to be that good. It's often things they haven't had in any high school course. A lot of this stuff is university level material, and pre-test results are typically relatively low, but at the end of the program, we give them the same questions over again.
When I took the pre-test, I was reading it, and then I remember looking down and not even being able to make out the word. I was trying to sound it out. I don't know, I'll just put C, I guess. Looking at it again in the post-test, after learning it, I was like, oh, this is when we went over here and we hiked around there, and that's when they gave us a lecture about it. It was like, I was able to learn and being able to go from nothing to knowing practically everything about it.
When I first began with the pre-test, I got roughly a 50%, which is usually what everyone starts around. When I took my post-test, I got a 94, and it was great because I went from a 50 to a 94. That's a large range, and I felt accomplished because I felt like I knew something.
It has changed quite a bit. I learned a lot during the weeks that we have GeoFORCE, and then I aced that post-test.
Last year, we spoke to a parent who volunteered that her daughter had been really frustrated with school that year. She wasn't really sure she wanted to finish. She was toying with the idea of dropping out, and the mother said she tried several different things, several different arguments, and the one that really gained some traction was, you don't get to go on the GeoFORCE trip if you drop out now. And she's with us again this year.
GeoFORCE changed how my outlook on it. I want to go to college. I want to further my knowledge. I want to actually learn something and have a bright future. After GeoFORCE, my work ethic did change a lot. Going from, oh, I'll do this later, to, we need to do this right now. Like, let's get on the ball and start working.
They encourage us to get at least a B or better in all our classes. And if not, they put us on academic supports and stuff. And so it really helps me to encourage myself to get better grades in school.
Before joining GeoFORCE, my academic life was somewhat poor. I was bad at studying, I had a poor work ethic, and overall I just wasn't doing much school-wise. When I joined GeoFORCE, the lectures and studying was very intensive, and that's how it usually changed. It made me develop a work ethic and a lot more appreciation for education.
In the native culture, nature is very important. It's the key of life. But I didn't actually understand nature, like why this happened or why that happened. Like, why did I get stuck right here on this turn, but not over here on this turn in the river? And now, after GeoFORCE, it opened my eyes on why things happen and how to navigate through everything. Being able to teach my nephews why you can't be on this side of the river, why it will mess up your outboard and things like that.
Shell and other corporations and industry should care about this program, not just as a gateway for these kids into the science disciplines, but it's also an opportunity for kids that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. It's our responsibility as corporations, industry, to help these people get opportunities that they may not otherwise get.
The sponsors, they do help us village students a lot because we're stuck in the middle of practically nowhere. The closest real hospital is 500 miles away. So trips like this, the people that make this happen, the sponsors, are really helping us students because we were always the underdogs. They really help us out by giving us a chance to learn something new. GeoFORCE is one of the best experiences I ever had in my young life.